That's not what the spiritual disciplines are for. The spiritual disciplines are the means of which we open ourselves up to God. The spiritual disciplines are the means by which we hear God's voice. They're the means by which He starts to change our hearts. They're the means by which He starts to work His righteousness out through us and in our lives. The spiritual disciplines are the means by which the Word becomes righteousness in our lives and in our hearts. Okay. And another thing is that the spiritual disciplines aren't a recent invention. They're not a product of the early 90s. The spiritual disciplines have been tried and true for thousands of years, and you see them throughout the scriptures, old and new. So what are the spiritual disciplines? Let's bring. Okay, prayer. What's that? Meditation on what? Yeah. Okay. So reading the scriptures, meditating on the scriptures.
Hunger and thirst for righteousness.
Yeah. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's a good one. Yeah. Fellowship. Fellowship. Yeah. Fasting. Yeah, that's a popular one. Solitude. Yes. Yes.
Sharing your faith.
Evangelism. Sharing your faith. Putting it out into works, right?
Yeah.
Just, yeah, exactly.
Worship.
Acting in the gift.
Practicing your spiritual gifts, yes. And worship, yes. Yes. Absolutely. Does anyone feel like we've missed any? Baptism, yeah. And that's almost like a step to closer towards God, right? A step of obedience, for sure. Okay. So what do we have? We got prayer. We've got reading the scriptures. We've got fellowship, which includes worship, prayer, and reading the scriptures with other believers, and praying with other believers, and hanging with other believers, so fellowship. Tithing, that's one. And fasting, solitude, practicing your spiritual gifts, which includes evangelism, but evangelism as well. So, it is important for the Christian, the mature Christian, to practice all of the spiritual giftings. You know, I've talked to people who said, Jared, I'm really good at going into my room and opening my Bible and reading the Word, studying the Word, meditating on the Word, praying to the Lord. I'm really good at that. But when it comes to fellowship, when it comes to intentionally building community, when it comes to, you know, going out with other people, practicing my spiritual gifts, I can't do that. It's not my personality. I'm going to leave. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the ones that I'm comfortable with, and then I'm going to leave the other ones for the other people. They can do those ones. And I've heard the opposite. I've heard people say, okay, Jared, I love community and I love fellowship and I love being involved in fellowship and praying with people, studying the scriptures with people. And like, that's the only way I can, you know, get my fill. And they said, you know, I'll leave the reading the scriptures and solitude stuff, I'll leave that to the introverts. They can take care of that one. But I've heard the same with fasting too. I can't fast, Jared. I love food too much. I love that one. And tithing and so on. But the fact is that we need to be practicing the full spectrum of the spiritual disciplines, because each one plays a role in the different ways of tilling our soil and working in our hearts. Each one has a role in that. God speaks to us in different ways in each of them. So we need to be practicing all of them. And here's a little example that Lawrence is going to like. Muscle imbalance. A muscle imbalance is when a lot of people have back pain and they can't do their activities that they love to do. They can't exert themselves in the manner that they'd like to do because of muscle imbalance. And that means that they keep using the same muscles in their back over and over again. So the main muscles are overdeveloped, but the stabilizing muscles or the opposing muscles are underdeveloped. And so what results from that is the main muscles are doing all the work all the time. They get stressed out, they get overdeveloped, and they get strained, and they get tight. They cause pain, and they cause unhealthy activity. And so if you have that, and you go to a guy like Lawrence, he'll be like, you got to exercise, and you got to train the supporting muscles. You got to build up the supporting muscles. And then suddenly the pain decreases, and you can do a full range of activity again. Right? All right. But it's the same way spiritually. If we're only practicing the spiritual disciplines that come naturally to us, we're going to have a spiritual imbalance in our lives. And we're going to feel it spiritually, and God won't be able to use us fully. So we need to be practicing the ones that don't come naturally to us. And as a matter of fact, if you work on building up those spiritual disciplines, you're going to see spiritual growth like you've never seen it before in your life. Because God's really going to step in, and He really respects that. So let me talk real briefly about just a few of the disciplines and some pitfalls that I, through talking to people, have realized that people can fall into sometimes. So prayer. Sometimes people say, okay, Jared, I have my quiet time with God while I'm driving. I have my quiet time with God while I'm on the bus. God desires solitude and quiet time with us where our 100% focus is on Him. And if you're driving, even though you might be sleeping while you drive, driving still takes a little bit of focus. No matter how long you've been doing it. I drive around all day, but I still have a little bit of focus towards driving, which is probably dangerous. I should probably have more focus. But He wants 100% of our focus. And so we need to find that time to focus on that, because that's when He really speaks to us. The other one with prayer is, okay, Lord, okay, Jared, I'm not the Lord. Okay, Jared, I pray right before I go to bed. I jump into bed, and then as I lay there, I just pray. I tried that before. My prayer life was about 2 to 3 minutes every day, because I fell asleep every time. And I'll tell you one tip on that one. There's one position that I find to this day really hard to fall asleep in. It's on your knees. It's almost impossible to fall asleep on your knees. So try that one out. The next one is reading the scriptures. And a lot of us are really good at just busting through the scriptures. Boom, done the Bible reading for the day. I was listening to a preacher online, or on the radio. He said, read the Bible prayerfully, carefully, and consistently. Prayerfully, because it's a conversation with God. God, what are you showing me? What are you showing me? Carefully, because we got to slow down sometimes and let it sink in. Let it sink in. And also because we got to see, okay, how does my life line up with the scriptures? That's what it means to read it carefully and to meditate on it. To meditate on it. And consistently, because reading the scriptures is like eating. You can't gorge on Sunday and expect that that's going to carry you through the whole week. I've tried that before too. Because guaranteed, no matter how much you eat on Sunday, by Monday afternoon, you're going to be feeling hungry again. And it's the same with scriptures. We need to be consistent about reading the scriptures daily. Just like breakfast. Okay, fasting, fasting is one of the most powerful disciplines that there is spiritually. And it's probably one of the most underutilized by our generation. And the reason why it's powerful, because it gets us in touch with a deep, primal need that we have. And so when we feel that deep physical need that we have for food, it's a reflection of our deep spiritual need that we have for God. And so when we're feeling that hunger, we can then say to God, Lord, as my body longs for food right now, so my spirit longs for you. So it's just a glimpse into that longing that we have for God that we just kind of go past on the surface if we don't exercise that discipline. So fast, and fast for more than one meal. Try 24 hours. Okay, a couple more things. One is our motivation. Our motivation for spiritual growth, ideally, would be the love of God drawing us to Himself, and the kindness of God drawing us to Himself. Lord, I know you love me. I want to get close to you. I'm willing to do anything to get close to you. Whatever you prescribe for me, train me. I want to get close to you. I want to learn to live like you. But sometimes, because of our sinful nature, that's not always the case. And so sometimes when what's in front of us doesn't draw us towards God, sometimes we need to take a glance behind us and look at what's chasing us and what's hunting us down and trying to destroy us. So the parable of sower talks about the first layer of soil where it's hardened and the birds come and eat the seed that's planted. And Jesus said those birds represent Satan. And he wants to come and steal the word out of your life. Satan is a roaring lion who's seeking all over the world to devour and to corrupt human beings. And he's got thousands of years of experience in corrupting human beings. And I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in people's lives around me, that when you stray away from the disciplines, when you stray away from that close relationship with God through the disciplines, Satan begins to move and he gets footholds and he starts to drag you down because he's always waiting at the door. Like Cain, he's waiting at the door.
Good word.
And so we need to learn how to stand up to Satan, to learn how to fight Satan. and to learn how to overcome, because that's what God promises in His power.
That's right.
The second soil is the rocks in the soil. And also remember the plant scorched because it didn't have a root system. So the rocks represent the flesh. And you guys, the flesh is like a 6-foot leech that's just, we're dragging it around and we're walking around. This big leech is just trying to suck us dry because it always wants more. It's lazy. It's never satisfied, the flesh. It always wants more. Give me more. Give me pleasure. Give me more pleasure. It's never satisfied. And so we need to learn how to pour salt on that leech and just shrivel them up. We need to learn how to starve that leech out.
Good word.
It's like that throwing the salt over, I don't know. Maybe that's where it comes from. You're not throwing it at Satan, you're throwing the leech. You want to dry him up. So anyway, we need to learn how, Paul said that I make my body my slave. That's what he said. And then the last one is the thorns and the weeds that are growing in the soil, and they choke out the word. And that represents the world, the cares and the riches, and the, seeking pleasure in the world, from the world. And the world is like a massive tsunami wave, like we've seen in the pictures of Japan. It just rolls inland, just taking down foundations, tearing up foundations, flipping over every building, just knocking down everything, and then sweeping it all back out to sea, leaving just devastation. And that's what the world wants to do to our foundations and to our faith and to our beliefs. It just wants to roll in, knock down all the foundations, uproot everything, and just sweep it right on back out to sea, leaving desolation. And that's why we need the foundation of our lives to be on Christ. Because he said when you build your house on a rock, that no matter how bad the streams and floods are that come, it won't destroy that house. I really like UFC. Not U of C, although that's a pretty cool place, but UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship. Ladies, I know you guys like that too, UFC. My girlfriend tolerates it. I love you. But the reason why I like UFC is because those fighters, they train so hard. And the reason why they train so hard is because they know that their opponent is training just as hard, if not harder, than they are. And they have to train in a multitude of disciplines. They have to train stand-up, like boxing. They have to train wrestling, jiu-jitsu, like all these submission moves. And they have to have really crazy conditioning. And the reason why I like that is they have so many disciplines that they have to train in. Because if they're weak in one area, their opponent is going to expose that weakness and is going to defeat them. If one fighter is weak in conditioning, the other fighter will just wear that fighter out till the end of the fight, and then he'll defeat him. And so in the same way, we have to be trained as well because we know who our opponents are. And when we know that our opponents are greater than us by ourselves, then that's motivation to draw near to God and to train and to let Jesus Christ train you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Amen.
Let Him train you. Let Him train you. One point about stumbling over the same sin over and over again. A UFC fighter, if he doesn't train and he's like a little bit slack, and he says to his trainers, you know what? I'm going to go out that night and I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to give it 110%. Don't worry. I'm just going to kind of be a little bit slack in training. But I'm going to go out and give it 110% that night, and I think my effort's going to overcome. By my effort alone that night, by my straining alone that night, I'm going to overcome. The other guy's been disciplined and trained, and he comes into that fight, and he out-techniques the other guy, and he just beats him. He out-conditions him, out-techniques him, just takes him out. But the other fighter who said, I'm not going to train that hard, he tries really, really hard that night. And he really strains himself, but he still loses. A lot of time with the temptations that we face over and over again, we strain really hard when those temptations come. Okay, this temptation's coming, like I'm going to give it 110. Next time that temptation comes around, I'm just going to, I'm going to really whoop it because I'm going to try real hard. But then we stumble again. And that's because it's not about the straining, it's about the training. And if you go back and are disciplined and have a regimen of spiritual disciplines and let Christ train you, you'll find that you conquer sin, you conquer temptation in your life that you stumbled all the time with before. And it's because you're trained, and it's because you're disciplined, and it's because your spiritual muscles are really massive. Too bad that wasn't more